wrote this earlier tonight on my way home. It says, I'm reminded, by Pastor Billy Higdon, I'm reminded of God's grace, His loving mercy, and His tender heart. Every time I think of where I've been and where God has brought me from. For a long path in my life, I listened to everyone else, but the one I should have been listening to. I conformed myself to their standards, and not my own, but most of all, not God's. But one day I decided enough was enough. God's opinion is all that really matters. And what He said, I did. I was going to submit to His will, no matter the cost, and that's the only way it should be. That should be your only way tonight. I remember a time in my life whenever I wasn't going after God's will. I wasn't doing what God wanted me to do. I remember a time when I conformed myself to everybody else and what I thought that they thought I should be, instead of what God created me to be. God created me and you tonight to be willing vessels, obedient children. The Bible says obedience is better than sacrifice. We can sacrifice all this world has to offer. We can sacrifice all of our time in prayer. We can sacrifice all of our time in prayer and fasting, whatever it may be. But if we're not obeying them, it's not going to mean nothing. We've got to obey God tonight. And I'll never forget as one person looked at me and they asked, why is life in this shape? And I said, because we're not obeying God. You know, it's one of the truest statements I've ever said in my life. Because when you're not obeying God, you will surely fall and you will not prosper. I don't care what you have in life, it won't last long if you're not obeying God. Today, this moment right here, is the 995th broadcast that I've done in a year. As I think back and I remember what God's brought me out of, and I think back of all the things that God's done in my life, since I decided not to conform myself to everybody else, but submit to Him, greater things have been done than I could ever imagine. Peace beyond understanding, and joy unspeakable and full of glory. Yeah, there's been times whenever I got down and out, but the whole time He was holding my hand. And even whenever I feel like no one was around, He was there. And that's the same way you are tonight. Just trust upon God. Remember a time when you wasn't in God's will, and remember now if you are. But if you're not in God's will, it's time you get in God's will. Because there's no excuse today for not serving the Lord. This is no time to quit, and it's no time to turn back. Failure is not an option tonight. No matter what we've gone through in life, all we've got to do is look up. I remember a time when I didn't even have the faith to look up. But I also look at me now and see where God's brought me from. And I'm no better than you are tonight. I just made up my mind one day to submit God's will no matter the cost. I may have lost some people along the way, but I've gained so much more. When you go into His kingdom, when you go in that holies of holies, when you bask in His presence, greater things are in store for you. Just begin to let go tonight and let God. Begin to release your faith in Him. All things pass away. All things become new, and we walk in that newness of life. Remember a time when you were serving the Lord, how much greater it was then, and it could get back to that now. Someone told me on Facebook earlier tonight. It's hard to get back with the Lord once you leave. No, it's not. All you got to do is go the neat route way. Begin to have faith in God and begin to pray. And there's nothing too hard for Him to do. All you've got to do tonight is ask. Remember a time. Again, I'm going to read this one thing for you one more time. This is I'm reminded. I wrote this today on the way home. I'm reminded of God's grace, His love and mercy, and His tender heart. Every time I think of where I have been and where has God brought me to. For a long path in my life, I listened to everyone else but the one I should have been listening to. I conformed myself to their standards and not my own, but most of all, not God's. But one day I decided enough was enough. God's opinion is all that really matters anyway. And what He said, I done. I was going to submit to His will. And that's the only way it will be. It's what you got to do tonight. It's to submit His will. I wouldn't be here tonight talking to you if it wasn't for His grace. Sure, I've had my obstacles. Sure, there's been a lot of things my way. But we're more than conquerors tonight. And if I can overcome, so can you. Greater is He that's in us than he that's in the world.